how I choose flight times. I wish I had a straight answer to this, but I don't. So let me just talk through a few different scenarios of how and why I choose flight times. So the number one thing I recommend, and early birds are going to love this, night owls are not. The best time to fly is actually first thing in the morning, and there's a couple reasons for that. But the biggest one being there are usually less delays in the morning, and it makes sense because a lot of times the jet has been parked overnight and crews and everything else that an airline needs to function is already in place. So you minimize delays that way. You minimize the potential for delay that say the plane, your inbound plane has been delayed because of weather or something else. So the best time to fly, unfortunately for night owls, is first thing in the morning. And I am definitely a night owl, not a morning person. So that really is really, really painful. But I will say it's true. It's the best time to fly. I've not, knock on wood, I've not had issues flying first thing in the morning, weather aside. But even then, I don't think I've had an issue with weather first thing in the morning. So if I'm choosing a flight time and I really want to ensure the trip is going to go as smooth as possible, I choose a morning flight. I know it really, really is not so fun. Another way that I choose flights is depending on the layover. And I'm not saying that I don't like layovers. I actually don't mind a layover, partly because I do enjoy being in an airport. I also have lounge access, which helps. But I do usually like to have a layover somewhere between 2 and 3 hours. Please don't cringe when I say that. There is good reason. And that is because things do happen. If your first plane is delayed, you have a little bit of wiggle room for wherever it is that you're getting to. I also find for most airports, especially large airports, you would do yourself a favor to have at least an hour's worth of transfer time between gates. Big airports like DFW, 45 minutes to an hour to change gates is pretty darn standard. Uh, Come at me if you want in the comments on that one. Been there, done that in that airport so many times, and a minimum 45 minutes. I've had a couple close, very close calls, I guess you could say, for missing a flight, which was not my doing because I hadn't planned that way. But they're perfect examples of exactly what I'm saying. Have a long layover because then you have some buffer room in case that first flight is late. Then they're done that, and you have a airport that you need a long transfer time in. Then they're done that. Had those combined at the same time. So that's another way that I choose a flight time. And sometimes it's morning flight, sometimes it's an afternoon flight. It just really depends, especially when you're traveling internationally and time changes and all that. But definitely choose, as a consideration, choose your flight time based on that layover. And that is something that you can flip and look the other way. If it's like a 19-hour layover, that could work in your favor, but probably not. It depends on where you're traveling to. You know, if you're traveling to a country where you need a visa to exit the airport, or maybe the airport's farther outside of the main city than you would like, it might not be worth it. There have been times I've done like a 24-hour layover and been able to go out and see a city for a day and then go back to the airport and fly out. It really depends on you, but just another factor to consider when choosing a flight time. And another thing for choosing flight times is, do I have to transfer airports on the other end? And a perfect example of this is the times that I have flown down to Ushuaia to get on a ship to go to Antarctica. I have had to change airports in Buenos Aires, and Buenos Aires has quite a lot of traffic, or has the potential for a lot of traffic, and the airports are not close to each other. I recommend a minimum of 4 hours to change airports, if not more. So that's another way I choose flight times is, okay, when am I gonna land? What does that layover time look like? And is it enough time for me to exit the airport, pass customs and border, get to the next airport, and go through the whole process again? If I need to check a bag, go back through security, all the things. So as another way that I look at choosing flights, and again, a perfect example was this last time I flew to Ushuaia. I was transiting through JFK. I think I had about a 6-hour layover in Buenos Aires, And fortunately for me, I had planned it that way. I ended up spending 2 hours on the tarmac waiting to be de-iced in JFK. Obviously, made it to Buenos Aires late, but I still had about 4 hours of transfer time between airports. Everything went totally smooth. I made my flight, even had time to get some food and drink in the lounge before boarding my flight to Ushuaia. So was very, very grateful for that planning. I know it sounds really inconvenient when you book a trip to say, oh my gosh, it's a 6 hour layover. I don't want to deal with it. But there are times where you are going to be very, very thankful that you planned your trip that way. Another way that I look, similar vein of thought, as for connecting flights, how do I choose a flight time? And if I've got a flight that I've got to connect to, whether that's domestic or international, I always make sure that I've got enough time there and a little bit of leeway time. It is easy to kill time in an airport these days between lounges and food and people watching. I mean, there's like sky decks you can go and enjoy. They're open to the public. So don't be afraid to have a little extra time. It's gonna pay off in the end. I promise you it will pay off. Other ways that I look at booking flight times is really dependent on how long it's gonna take me to get to an airport. And that can go for any type of flight that I'm taking. For example, if I'm in London, I like to stay more towards the central part of London. And it takes me, I think I can do the math here real quick. It takes me at least an hour, somewhere between an hour and a half to get to Heathrow Airport. Um, I think it takes me about 45 minutes or so to get to Gatwick. Let's just say on average, it takes me about an hour to get to the major airports outside of London. So if I'm booking a flight, I look at that and I like back it out and say, okay, if my flight leaves at 11 o'clock in the morning, then I need to be at the airport 3 hours early. So that's being there at 8 for check-in. And if it's gonna take me an hour to get out there, at least that's being on the train at 7. That means being up at the latest by 6 a.m. and probably should be up at 5:30 just to get myself a little extra half-hour buffer time. So I'm already looking at the lead time leading up to a flight and thinking, how early do I really want to get up? What does that mean for my rest the night before? Am I gonna be prepared for the day of travel ahead? So that's another way. Another thing I consider when I'm looking at flight times to book. I think I've said this many times before, but if you didn't know, I'm based in the United States and I'm in a place where I only have a small regional airport. So for me to get to a major international airport, it's at least a 4 hour drive either way, which means I've had at least a 7 hour day, usually closer to 8 or 9 hours before I even board the plane. So that's getting out of bed, closing up the house, driving, and then giving myself about 3 hours before a flight. And I know some people are going to say, well, you don't need to be that early to a flight. I'm going to tell you right now, listen to the airline. When they say to be about 3 hours early to an international flight, you would be surprised. I've seen so many things go wrong, and I've been thankful I've had that time. It's just, if nothing else, it reduces your amount of stress before you fly. You will be so thankful you gave yourself that time. So those are just a couple ways that I choose. Or I guess more than a couple. Those are several ways that several things I consider, I should say, for booking a flight. I can't say never, but that it's always worked out well for me following these principles, these rules, these considerations. And I recommend them to everyone. They just work. That nothing else, it reduces your stress. So as always, I will stop rambling and just say I'm excited to have you here. I'm looking forward to where this goes, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.